Back in 1980, we exposed mice to high doses of alcohol at just one stage of their pregnancy, really early in their pregnancy, and we were able to show that you could make pretty much all of the facial features in mice with exposures at that time that are considered characteristic of full-blown fetal alcohol syndrome in people. Recently, we've been using a really wonderful technique called magnetic resonance imaging. We've also been using another technique called diffusion tensor imaging to look in great detail at the brains of mice that had been exposed to alcohol. We can make a whole spectrum of brain abnormalities, and we get different kinds of brain abnormalities depending on the day that the mouse embryo is exposed. And we know that if we expose mouse embryos to alcohol at one specific stage, we can make the facial features that look very much like those in human fetal alcohol syndrome. That stage in development in mice is on their 7th day of development, when the embryo is just going through a process that we call gastrulation. That same process happens in people, and it happens in human embryos when they're at about the 17th day of their development. This is at a time when most women wouldn't realize that they're pregnant yet. We think that people appreciating how early you can make the face of full-blown fetal alcohol syndrome is really important in terms of preventing the problem, because people don't know they're pregnant yet at those early stages, so it speaks very loudly for pre-pregnancy planning. You probably can only make that specific face at a really early stage, but alcohol exposure at other stages can cause other types of damage. The brain, in fact, is vulnerable to alcohol at virtually every stage of its development. We've been finding some abnormal tissues in the brain called heterotopias. These are associated with seizure activity, and in fact, it's now beginning to be appreciated that seizures are in fact a part of the FASD spectrum. We feel like what we find in the lab is really directly applicable to the human condition. In our lab, we've had the advantage of being able to take our findings to work with clinicians, and I think it affects the way that they practice and the way that they see individuals with fetal alcohol syndrome. And we've also had the opportunity to begin to develop some curricula that are used in middle and high school classes. They're science-based, hands-on curricula where they can actually do or see experiments that show that alcohol has a devastating effect on a developing organism, and I think a lot of times seeing is believing. Unless we put a lot of resources into prevention, we're going to keep having to come up with more and more resources to deal with more and more affected people. I mean, it's absolutely clear from the work, from the embryos that I look at on a daily basis. These are mouse embryos, not human embryos, but we can model very well in mice what you see in people. And I know that you can do a ton of damage really early. You know, it's one thing to say, well, I know I'm pregnant now, so I'm going to be good. It's another thing to say, well, within the next year or so, I'm hoping to become pregnant, or I'm not using a method of birth control, and so there's a chance that I might become pregnant, so I'm not going to drink. It's just not in people's repertoire, and it needs to be. One drink may lead to another drink, and a drink in one person's eyes is this much, in another person's eyes is this much, and so it's just safest to say, don't do anything. If there's a chance that you're pregnant, simply abstain from using alcohol. People are always wanting to know if there isn't a known safe level, and so they could have just a little bit and feel like it's okay. And the answer is, in fact, we don't know if there's a safe level, so better safe than sorry. It's only 9 months of a woman's life, and it's the entire life of her offspring.